Good, right? Awesome. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about, it's the week 3, and we're going to talk about authentication and how to build an API, which is quite crucial when it comes to building any kind of a application. If you're using whether it's a web app or whether it's a mobile app, it's quite crucial so that you can sort of have users have authentication. So whenever you use an app where you have to log in, so there's a bit of a process in the backend, which is slightly different to like a normal API call. So today's focus is to discuss that and the rest of the tools that we can use to build this kind of application. So yeah, I'll try to sort of go to the fundamental as well so that everybody understands that. But if you have done a CS degree, you should have seen this earlier. And I'll also show like how to sort of create an API with OpenAI. And you already know how to call OpenAI, but what you're trying to focus is like how do you sort of wrap that call with the authenticated sort of a endpoint calling for that you can add security to your endpoint so that only the authenticated users can sort of access that. Um, yeah, and during the session, feel free to send your questions as usual in the chat, and I'll try to pick them up as we go or towards the end. So we're gonna try and sort of cover REST API, and a bit of HTTP methods, and then understand FastAPI. So FastAPI is a library, Python library that sort of lets you create these endpoints, and this is the one of the most preferred tools that you can use to create endpoints when you're using ML AI tools, building ML and AI applications. There are other alternatives, but I think I recommend FastAPI. And then how do you create an endpoint, like, and where you can the OpenAI endpoint, where the users can call that endpoint from different ways, or from the front end, or using just something like Postman. So you can sort of test how that works. And then we'll look into how to implement authentication using JWT, so which is like a token-based system that we use. So JW stand for JSON Web Tokens, if I'm not mistaken. So it's basically how we sort of validate an API call, whether the API call is sent by a authenticated user, and we'll sort of discuss how that's implemented. And then at the end, we'll test this with tool called Postman, or using curl, which is directly from terminal. You can call the endpoint with the right tokens. Yeah, this is the focus for today. And so first up is REST API. So if you use any kind of application, mostly to be around that application in the backend should be using something like REST API, like a web-based application. There are different protocols, architecture styles. If you're using like IoT, so like MQTT, things like that. But if you're using basically any kind of a app or a web service or the internet, you'll be definitely using mostly using REST API. So write a story around REST API. So this is coming out for a PhD thesis, the REST API. And the guy took like 8 years to complete the PhD on REST API. So it's like a really long PhD thesis. But out of that came like one of the most like commonly used sort of API architectures that are out there, where the entire sort of modern web is built on. So definitely check that out. I'd recommend that. I've skimmed through the thesis. It's quite great. But yeah, it's almost like 10 years of that person's life. So REST API is built on top of HTTP methods. So you don't have to use HTTP to build like RESTful APIs, but that's the most common way that you can sort of use HTTP, like how to build REST API. So HTTP methods are like get, post, put, patch, delete, things like that. So these are like different ways that you can sort of call like a server and get some information back. And so HTTP is like a protocol where REST is like the architecture that is built on top of that set of protocols. And so if you look at this sort of diagram on the web left-hand side, you get the client, like the browser and the app that you'll be using, and you can use like a get or a post API call to get to make a call to the server. First, it could be something like to get you authenticated, and after that you get the authenticated token, you can sort of make another call to get like some sort of a resource from the server side. So this is what you'll this is like a summary of like how like this client server communication happens using HTTP methods. And then you have, if you look at like HTTP call, like or like I've shown like a possible example, like a get call, you'd have like the host authorization, like the token that is needed, and how you're sort of expecting the result as a JSON format. So you can sort of enforce that within the HTTP call. And so whatever the server side code looks like, it should be written to accept these kind of calls. So you can have the headers as well as the body. So if you want to send some information within the call, you can have that as well. I'll sort of show some examples at the end using Postman. So you'll see like how this looks like. So these are like CS fundamentals, but quite critical if you're doing AI engineering, because like AI engineering is built on top of CS software engineering. And then when you make that call, you get a result. So you get a status code, which is whether successful or not. And you might have seen these uh, values from like 100 to like 500. So each value has different indication. Even each range has a different indication. So like 200 is like success code, and there's like 500 range is another set, and like if the authentication fails, it's something around 400. So things like that. So you can, depending on the number that you get, you can definitely pick what went wrong. So when you start building applications, you get familiarized with these codes, like, and people can sort of memorize everything because you see them so often. You know, like if it's 404, but yeah, the page is missing, something like that. So you would remember these kind of codes as you start developing, and then you get a like set of data that you requested for. Like for example, if you're asking for a endpoint to OpenAI and getting some results back, that result should be in the body of the data. And so these are some examples of how it looks like, and you get like sort of a JSON response that you can use within your application. So yeah, this is the quick high level overview of HTTP API, REST API and HTTP methods that you can use to build sort of applications. So then moving on to FastAPI. So as I mentioned earlier, FastAPI is one of the libraries that you can, Python libraries that you can use to create these sort of API for your application. There are alternatives like Flask, Django, other sort of libraries that you can use. What I've seen mostly, unless it's like MVP, like a small scale design, people tend to use FastAPI for like production ready code, and like highly recommend this. Like that's what I've seen talking to like industry leaders. Like this is one of the go-to method for building like simple API calls with sort of any kind of ML model or like a like LLM endpoint. So there's some of the reasons that you like that like features that's available within Fast API that you can sort of use to build um, like these kind of modern applications. As I mentioned earlier, so high performance Python web framework. So what I mean by that is like, for example, if you take Flask tend to have, um, you need to have synchronous requests, so you can't do like asynchronous handling. Because of that, like this quite it's you have to write manually or add other extra libraries to handle those kind of asynchronous calls. So because of that, like Fast API, that this is built inbuilt. So it's built on Starlet, so it's like dedicated for web, and it also has pydantic inbuilt. So pydantic is another library that you can that's used mostly in data validation. So for example, to enforce like if like a data object has specific fields, specific data types. So this is commonly used, for example, with SQL calls, like to check if the data is coming properly, and also with the APIs. So we can use that within Fast API to make sure that the the data objects that are coming into the API or coming out of the going out of the API like validated and like so that has the right kind of data structure. So those are like inbuilt features of FastAPI. So and apart from that, we also have like docs using Swagger UI. So Swagger is like sort of a API specification sort of a protocol, and then you also have you can visually see what are the available APIs and sort of execute them, test them. So I'll show that what it looks like in a bit. Swagger is quite useful, especially specifying how you want your API looks like. At the same time, it sort of gives somebody, if you have Swagger specification, somebody has to come and sort of check what are the APIs and how to call them, what sort of example input that you need to send into the API. It's quite useful to have like a Swagger specification. And you have like type hints, like data validation. These are like must-have features anyways, but like FastAPI sort of enforces this. Um, because it's like because it's built for speed and it's relatively simple. It's very similar to Flask, I would say. So you can sort of build apps really fast using FastAPI. So I think I've made the case for FastAPI, why you should use this, and do check it out separately as well. Like because knowing FastAPI it's going to help you a lot, like in your CV, if you say like, Fast API, that's a great tool to have. So Flask is the beginner level, and like you can move to Fast API or Django when you want to like understand more production ready API tools. So yeah, I think like I discussed some of this earlier as well, like why you should pick Fast API. I think async support is it's like a really important feature. So what that means is that you can sort of make call to another method's endpoints, and then if it is waiting for some information, you can call other endpoints. You're not getting blocked because that API call is getting processed. And you can have built-in validations for data types using pydantic. So it's great. Um, and like, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's quite easy to integrate with OpenAI as you like, if you have like a script with Python, you can easily move them to like different endpoints. And you can now quickly calling OpenAI um, via FastAPI, and you can expose that endpoint to any kind of application. And also it's natively integrated with JWT. It's great for authentication. So like you can have secure APIs that are like protected through JWT authentication. So yeah, I think I'll try to show this like by building an application. So I have like sort of a template that I've built right now. I'll sort of go through that, like how fast API looks like. So generally, so first you need to sort of install these libraries like the fast API. So you can use like either you have these within requirement.txt file, or you can use pip install to sort of install the fast API, UECon, so python.environment to load environment variables, request for HTTP requests, also pydantic and pyjwt or JWT. So this is like to generate the token that is needed for authentication. So you can like install this within your virtual environment and sort of create a file that looks for like a project looks like this. You'll have the main.py that sort of controls the endpoints. I mean, like much more complicated projects looks totally different, but this is like the basic way that you can build something. So you'll have main.py, the .env file to store your environment keys, auth.py to control authentication methods, and OpenAI API .py, which sort of controls the OpenAI calls. So I'll sort of go through each file and sort of explains like why each file is necessary. First, I'm going to try and create the .env file. Within that, you'll usually have the OpenAI key and your JWT secret and the algorithm that you're using to sort of encrypt the dataset. So, for example, you can use HS256. So there are quite a few algorithms that you can use to sort of encrypt these tokens because you shouldn't be like using uh, unencrypted keys because these are like private keys. For this, generally recommend like creating like a long hash, but like we can have like a string as well. So it's not always critical. So you simply create .env file. So if I go to my cursor, so you'll have something like this. So you'll have the OpenAI key and JWT secret, JWT algorithm that you're going to use to encrypt the key. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And during the when you write other sort of Python code, you can sort of refer to this and sort of extract these environment variables while you're running it. And the next step is basically used called main.py. And you import FastAPI. So, and then you'll have, you'll create variable called app using FastAPI. So this is like create a FastAPI application. So you can use that to add the endpoints and sort of wrap them using this decorator, which is how we can sort of control access to this endpoint and sort of also direct when people come to a specific endpoint, they'll come here. So this is how the structure looks like. I have slightly different development on my side, but I'll show how it looks like. So if you go to main.py, so I'll sort of comment this out. For now, this is for login. So we don't plan to have login right now. Yeah, I think we'll comment this as well. Move this to here for now. I want to like have a fresh call. That doesn't require authentication. So, and you can also remove. So what we should generally get is like if you go to this endpoint, we should get just trying to see the endpoint that we need to go to. Create this endpoint to see. Yeah, I think so I just created what I had here. So let's just ignore this for now. So the idea here is like so if I show this, so if I go to yeah, localhost should be available in 8,000. So if you sort of go to the directly to the URL, you should get this message. So what happens here is like it's sort of hitting this endpoint. So there's nothing here. So it's hitting this endpoint, hitting this endpoint, and it's returning this message. So we'll have that message directly. So the next thing is like try and see if we can return this one. But before we do that, we need to sort of create the OpenAI functionality. So we'll go here. So I've already run this command. So after you sort of build this, you run this command. So what it says is like this is the server side, the library that sort of runs the server, and ask you to run the file main.py, and we are also defining app, which is the name of the FastAPI variable, and asking it to enable reload. So when we do a change, it will automatically reload. We can also go to this place, which is shows the Swagger UI. So this is what it looks like. So if we use Swagger specifications, you should get something like this. So FastAPI already has this. So you can see like what are the available endpoints. So we don't have any specific endpoints here. We have like a the normal slash get endpoint. So this is what it shows. Like for example, it doesn't expect any parameters. You can directly call that, and you're expecting like a return like a string. So what it does is like it sort of converts this sort of method and the endpoint into like a Swagger UI spec. So you'll have like all the endpoints here, so you can like sort of experiment with it. So you can try it out, and if you execute it, you should get hello from FastAPI that we were checking earlier. The really easy way if you create the endpoint to check whether that API is working properly. So you can see like you got like the 200 for successful responses, you get 200 here, and and you get the messages in the body, and you get like the headers as well, so other information that I mentioned earlier in that response. So this is the command that it got executed when you press execute, and you can see that as well. This is the URL that is sort of calling. So likewise, you can do much more complicated API verification, checking if it's working from here. Yeah, so this is the first step of getting the API to work. And then we want to create another method for us to call the OpenAI, which we have done in the past, but also I'll show very quickly how it looks like. So I've created openai.api.py, which is the file that has the script methods to call the OpenAI endpoint. This has a bit more code, like handling exceptions, things like that. But the core part of this is like loading the OpenAI key from the environment and sort of creating this sort of data object for us to make a call. It's quite simple, like how we done in the past as well. But this method will be called within the main.py. So if I sort of remove this and sort of, so we sort of create another method now, sort of it should call, when you call slash ask, this is the endpoint, like, so when you call that, it should sort of make a call to OpenAI and get the results that we want. Yeah, so this is what it looks like, how you'll create. So you get the required sort of imports from FastAPI, and so depends is the way that you can check if the current user is authenticated. So you can use that, and only then you can sort of expose this. So in that way, you can sort of make sure that this endpoint is not getting um, sort of accessed by intruders. So yeah, so depend is calling get current user. So we'll have sort of implemented this as well. So what it does is like it sort of checks the token that's getting passed on and see if that token has a specific user ID, and if that is like the expected user that we want to to give access to here. So I was sort of move yeah, sort of create this logging endpoint as well, which is quite needed here. So before we test this, I also want to make sure that this works without the current user. So let's see if that works. See, try and so if I reload this, now we can see there are two endpoints for us now. The post method for logging if you want to do a login, and you also have askGPT, which is an endpoint for calling the GPT endpoint, which sort of calls Ask OpenAI, which was created here. Ask OpenAI, and you pass in like a prompt, which is a string. Let's say if you ask a question, and that's get sort of loaded into this message and sent to OpenAI, we get a response, and then if check if that is okay, and then you get the extract the body and sort of then send the content of that body from here. So what it does is like make a call to OpenAI and return that to the endpoint. So right now we don't have any authentication inbuilt to this. I haven't had this user checking part. So hopefully should work, but let's give it a go. So I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna add like the question that I'm gonna ask. You so we got a response here. So I'm just a computer program, so I don't have feelings. I'm here ready to help you. So you get a response like this. So the code is 200, so that's great. It's working. And this is the command that was executed from a curl point of view. This is the request URL. So you have it's calling sort of the local host and dash ask, and then you are passing in a parameter. So whenever you separate by sort of, you might have seen like when you look at URLs, you pass in like these separated by the question mark. So whenever you separate by question marks, you can add these variables that you can pass in as parameters. So we are passing a variable called prompt, and it has this string attached to it. So for example, in websites, they want to track where you come from. You might have seen something like UTM. So for example, if you're coming from a separate website or from a Google search, you load, let's say UTM equals Google, something like that. So the website tracking tools will catch where you're coming from, so they can figure out like where their users are coming from. So this is how you do that, and you can, as similar to that, we can sort of pass in parameters or pass in data to this endpoint using these kind of variables. So this is how it looks like, the actual request URL, and we get the response, and it looks yeah, it doesn't have any issues right now. And I think before I sort of go and implement the login part here, I want to try and sort of go through some of the basics of JWT so that we understand what we are building here. And so it should be here. We're building here. So yeah. So the next section is about JWT, which is the most common way to sort of implement authentication. So it stands for JSON Web Token. Um, what it does is like it's first let the user log in using their username and password. In the backend, it verifies, okay, if this is a user is authenticated user, and you get a token which is called JWT, and you stores this within like local storage, let's say like ideally as a cookie, and then you, whenever you make an API call, it will sort of attach this as the token, bearer token, in the header section, so that the API call that you're making is already tells the server this is coming from a user that's authenticated. So that's how you sort of make sure that the API call gets the required data from the server side. So you can also add a bit more information into this. For example, this token, you can set a time when it will expire. Let's say like after 1 hour or 24 hours. There's quite a lot of regulation around this. Like for example, different types of, so for example, different types of tokens are there. There are marketing focus tokens. There are tokens which are used for logging, things like that. So if you take GDPR, you can't necessarily store some type of tokens without user's consent, but things like login you can, because it's required for offering the service. So it's quite important subject, but I think like just understanding the basic is sufficient for you to build something using JWT. So this is how the authentication flow looks like. So I grabbed this image from this blog post. You can check the entire blog post yet later. So this sort of shows like how the authentication sort of works and the authentication flow. So whenever you log into an app, this is how it actually works. So user logs in, and then you get like sort of login page, and you send the authentication from the username and password. And when you do that, you get authenticated and you get like the JWT back, and it gets stored within your client side, whether it's on your app or in your browser on your laptop, it gets stored. And whenever now Vue sort of makes an API call, it sort of attaches that and send it to the backend, and it gets validated. If that is correct, you get the resources back. So this is like the general authentication flow. And as I said earlier, these tokens generally should last long enough for you to get your work done. But if it doesn't have any purpose, it should get destroyed. So whenever you clear cookies on your browser, this is why you sometimes use sort of automatic login to your specific websites. So yeah, so I think like the next thing I want to cover is like what JWT has, like and yeah, so if you take a JWT token, you can sort of it has like three high level sort of topics. You have the header, you have the payload, and you have the signature. So you can decode the token and read this if you have the right library to decode it. So it can tell like what's the algorithm that was used, the type of token like JWT in this case, and other information if you have like if you have added like for example the name, subject, if you have if the user has admin privileges. So you can add a lot more information here. This is like the expiration detail, like how long this token should be valid for, and if you want to assign like to make sure that this is token that was generated by the actual server side. You can sign it so that whenever you send another call with this token, it can verify using sort of cryptographic checking to see if this token is an actual token, because there's quite a lot of security vulnerabilities that could happen. You can sort of hijack tokens and like send sort of malicious tokens to get access. So you need to make sure that the token was created from the original source, and you can sort of sign this cryptographically to make sure that this is a valid token. So this is a really interesting field. Like, do read that out. But I think understanding this is sufficient for us to build AI applications. So the next step is like implementing the sort of the auth.py, which is like the scripts, the methods that is needed to sort of handling the authentication side of things. So this is um, what is needed. So you need the required sort of libraries imported, and then you need to load the JWT secret and the algorithm that is needed. And you need to create like a security object using HTTP bearer. And then you have like you at least you need two methods. One is to create a token. So we are sort of mimicking the server side here. So we're creating the token whenever you sort of send some information. So user ID, and you have the user ID, and then you need to add the expiration details, like how long this token should last, and the algorithm that you're using, in this case HS256. This will give you a token. Whenever you log in, you'll get this token back. So there are different services that lets you give this authentication piece separately as a service. Things like Okta, things like that. But you can also implement it by yourself. And then the second piece is like it's like getting the current user. So whenever um, you make an API call, you need to get the information to check if the current user is validated. So this will help from API call point of view to check if the user is authenticated. I'll show how it looks like on the code side. I added a bit more information around this, but this is the basic flow that is needed. So this is what it looks like, the auth page that has create token method, and then you'll also have get current user information, and hopefully we should have yeah. So it's the get current user is sort of passed in here to make sure that that user is authenticated. Only then we should be able to get that should be able to access OpenAI endpoint here. So we'll try and see if we can check this. Yeah, there's one more method I need to add, which is the login page. So for example, for users to send the username and password, we need an endpoint to send that information, which will call the create token method we created earlier, and that will sort of send the token back, which is quite simple. And I have implemented that on main.py, which is this one. So if you call the login endpoint with these two parameters, for now, I've sort of hard coded the user admin and password, which is not right. This is incorrect, like from a security point of view, but this should get the app working for us. So when it like actually done in production, you should like either use like a service, or you should like manually sort of encrypt this and add salt into that. So that is the process on how to like sort of check, validate this at like the username and password rather than directly having this. So and even when you store those information, needs to be stored in separate tables, so that it's sort of so you shouldn't like store password as like this. But for us to demo like how this works, I've built it like this. But yeah, this sort of checks if the username and password gets matched. So I'll just add a comment here, not to do doing production. Um, and then you'll get the token sort of backed to the user, and you can use that. So this is still running, so that's great. So we can sort of test this out. I also want to show how this looks like on Swagger side. So So this is like, as I said earlier, this is how it looks like. Two endpoints. You have two post endpoints. One is to login, and for this one, if you pass in, let's say, we wanna say try it out. We're passing in admin. I think the expected one is pass. The password is pass. So we are sending this information to this endpoint, and if we execute this, we should get a key back. Yeah. So we get the JWT token here, like this. I also want to show how to decode this token. So if you use this token, let's say for JWT token, I'm gonna try and see if I can find something. So we copy this token and add this to one of these online tools. Um, Oops. I need to automatically decode what it has. Like it says algorithm was HS256, type is JWT. So sub means subject, it's admin here. Now what we define EXP is expiration. So you can, like, if you capture like a token, you can sort of decode this and see what it has. And this is how on the back end, it also verifies this, like what sort of information is there, and then that's how we sort of authenticate. So, but just want to quickly show that that you can do that. And now we sort of copy this. So this is authenticated token from our side, our backend. So we should be able to use this with our other endpoint, which is to ask GPT. So if you, this should be ideally password protected. So if I say, hey, it should not send anything. So we got like a 403, which is forbidden, not authenticated. So we can't access as an endpoint. So first, what we need to do is like use this key and need to authenticate. So there are two ways you can authenticate from here, or you can authenticate from here, the endpoint itself. You can pass in the token. Um, as I said earlier, we are sending this as a bearer token. This is how we sort of send in the header, HTTP header. We are adding token called bearer token, which that's the JWT value that we got from the login. So I'll paste this and authorize this, and I think it is fine now. Now, if I say hi, we should get something back. So yeah, we get the 200 response saying it worked. Hello, how can I assist you today? So in this way, you can actually have an authenticated conversation with this endpoint. I want to also show that what happens if we write something not authenticated. So this is not the token that we got, it's just a random token. And if we see execute, it says invalid token, so it doesn't work. So this is how you can quickly check this, but also I want to show very quickly, there's another tool called Postman, which is highly useful if you're building this API and like must-have tool for this kind of authentication work, and you can run quite a few uh, much more complex sort of evaluations. So I've created already two endpoints here. So one is for logging, one is for the Ask ChatGPT endpoint. So if I go to login, so I'll start from scratch so you know how to create one. So whenever you so you need to download Postman if you haven't. So this is the website. So Postman is a tool that lets you sort of experiment with endpoints and run tests. And yeah, it's a great tool to learn. And I'll recommend this, especially testing locally. Quite a few, like it has sophisticated evals, etc. If you want to run experiments on your endpoints to stress test the endpoint, and it has like a local, like downloadable version of this. So I've downloaded that and sort of install the Postman software, and you can create this workspace and create sort of collection. So I've created, go to new, and you can create like sort of HTTP based testing, but you can do other types of testing as well, WebSocket, Socket.io, GraphQL, MQTT for IoT, so things like that. So you can create sort of environment. And then, so I've created type, and so then within this, I can create the request. So I can add a request here, which sort of creates you can select the type of request, whether it's a get or a post. I think all my calls were post, if I'm not, yeah, both of them are post requests. So I create a post request. So the endpoint looks like this. This is the login one. So the login request, and it is expecting two parameters, which is one is username, other one is password. So we can add in the required values here. So username is admin and password is pass for us right now. And we should be able to get something back. So if you change this to password 123, it should, yeah, it's not getting validated. So you can test like this. So I'll go back to pass and send, you get the key right now. I also need to create another endpoint. Uh, in- so in this one, it's another post request, which is for the second endpoint. And I'm gonna try and copy this. So this is the endpoint that we're calling, and we also need to add a parameter called prompt, I think. Prompt, yeah, prompt. Adding this, we can add the question that you want. Hi, how are you doing? So this is the question that you can ask ChatGPT. There's another important thing we need to add here. We need to add authorization. So now we have a token that we got from the login side of things. We need to add this as a bearer token, and which is the key that we got earlier from the previous call. This one. So I think I need to get string as well. I'll double check if that's the case. What is it now? We are remove this. I think it should be string anyways. So this should authenticate. Oh, token expired. I need to get another token. Let's see. Get this token. Yeah, so this token was validated. You need to have strings. It's already a string. So you can get this response from ChatGPT side. So you can now sort of overlay this with the UI. So you can, after people log in, you can write the API call and get the response and sort of show that on some sort of a Next.js or Android app that you're building. So, but this is the important part. So you can sort of protect the endpoints and have the like secure calling, especially if you like accessing database and things like that. This is quite important that you have this kind of protection for your endpoints. But this is like the basic that you need to know to build this kind of applications. Um, so so this is what's happening under the hood. Like it's a generally a curl call that's a calling the endpoint, first getting the token, and then using that token here in the bearer token, and then sort of with a prompt, we are sort of calling the other endpoint. So you do that, and you can sort of get a response back. And I think this is what I want to cover for today, and we got like a few more minutes, so we can sort of open up for questions, and I'll do a quick summary of what we discussed.